We have a big problem when it comes to writing nonfiction using AI, a problem that is sabotaging a lot of authors and keeping most of them from getting any traction with their nonfiction books. And that's whether you use AI or not. But if you take time to understand my strategies that I'll get into in this video, that should no longer be a problem. And once again, that's whether you use AI or not. Now, if you're new here on this channel, you know I'm a very AI positive person, but only so far as it is used as a productivity tool to enhance rather than to replace one's own knowledge or creativity or just thinking. And yet, with the nonfiction space in particular, there has really been a huge problem that I've seen pop up, and one that's more prevalent in nonfiction right now, but might eventually be something we see a lot more of in fiction as well in the future, especially as AI's quality gets better and better. But believe it or not, these problems didn't actually originate because of AI. They existed long before AI, but AI has had the unfortunate side effect of really exasperating the problem, making it easier to do. So let me show you what I mean. Firstly, I would like to show off this article right here. This is just one of many articles similar to this that are showing off just how scammy AI-generated book rewrites are flooding Amazon. This article in particular is talking about what appear to be AI-generated imitations and summaries of their books on Amazon. There's little they can do to rein in the ripoffs. And this is just an example of AI being used in a much more scammy capacity. One that I definitely don't condone and is probably illegal because in all likelihood what they're doing is they're taking an existing book and just having AI rewrite it, which is considered plagiarism even if it wouldn't necessarily pass a plagiarism check. There's one example here of someone that found that their book was just completely rewritten, and Amazon took it down. Took the imitation down, and Amazon said, while we allow AI-generated content, we don't allow AI-generated content that violates our Kindle Direct Publishing content guidelines, including content that creates a disappointing customer experience. So I think this is a good clarification. That's not really the AI content that's the problem, but it's how it has been used in this case, in a case that's very clearly scammy. And then you'll also have a lot of options where people will do summaries of books, kind of in the hopes that the summary will be picked over the original book, especially if you price it a whole lot lower. It's something that definitely existed long before AI, but it's something that's so much easier to do now with AI that we're just seeing so much more of it. Now, if you ask me, this is actually not as big of an issue as people seem to think it is, because most of these things don't get seen at all, especially if you as a nonfiction author are doing everything correctly, that even if you're doing that and people are making all of these imitation books of your book, chances are they're not going to come near to digging into your profits as much as you might be afraid that they would. And that's because Amazon's algorithm is pretty good at these days at identifying quality and what people actually want and establishing legitimacy of an author or that sort of thing. So it's not something that I personally worry about too much. But if I want to be a nonfiction writer and I want to use AI to help me out in that process, what is a more legitimate way of doing that that's not a huge scam like this obviously is? And to answer that, we really need to go back to the two main strategies that people had around nonfiction even before AI, which I think are still relevant to the conversation today. The first of the main strategies is that people will write one book and then they will link it to a bunch of different courses, a YouTube channel, services that you provide, etc. So while the one book might not make a lot of money on its own, it serves as a way of getting people in the door to where the real money is made. And that happens usually down the pipeline in your own business. And I'll get back to that strategy in a second. Now, the second strategy is to do a lot of research to find underserved categories and niches on Amazon, and then as quickly and efficiently as possible, write several books that fill all aspects of that niche. The usual strategy that online gurus that claim to be experts in this field would teach about this stuff was to hire ghostwriters to write very short books so they wouldn't cost a lot and you could get a lot of them out there that were purely informational. And pretty much all they were doing is just regurgitating info that had been done 1,000 times before. And most of the time, this didn't actually require the person publishing the books to know anything about the topic. And with AI, this has also become something that is much easier to just, regurgitate a topic over and over again in various different ways. And of course, you would probably also see a lot of the more scammy options, like writing summaries of a book and posting those, where those summaries were often very clearly designed to be mistaken for the original book, which we saw with that Wired article. And unfortunately, this is the way people are doing it these days. And it's borderline scammy at this point. Even writing a regurgitated book that just covers the topic in a different way is honestly quite scammy. And if I'm being honest, the idea behind that strategy is that you could find a niche that isn't really well filled, right? Find something where a lot of people are searching for a topic, but there aren't really that many books on that topic. And so they would write something and make sure to fill the niche. But the problem with that now is that AI can do it so easily that all of those niches are going to get filled very, very quickly. And so I do not think that this is a strategy that will work long term, especially if all you're doing is writing purely informational books that have nothing original to contribute to them. And I'll show you the way you have probably seen other gurus show you how to write this kind of nonfiction book. You've probably seen something like this before. If we go to say ChatGPT and say something like, give me an outline, we'll say a chapter outline for a book about establishing small habits. And just do something similar like that. And okay, now it's giving us the outline. So chapter 1, understanding habits, what habits are and how they form, the habit loop, how habits shape identity in daily life. And then you can say, okay, now give me a more fleshed out outline for chapter 1. Okay. And boom. All right. Now it's giving me a much more fleshed out outline of chapter 1. We got the habit loop, cube, routine, reward, keystone habits, identity and habits. Oh, okay. All great stuff, right? And then they'll be like, okay, now write the entire chapter in 3,000 words. All right. So I let this go, and now it's going to actually start drafting the whole thing. Okay. And in this case, it's asking me a follow-up question. And I'll say, so it wants me to know if it wants a popular self-help style or a more academic analytical tone. We'll just say popular self-help style. And in this case, it's splitting things up into 1,000 word chunks according to what it's telling me here. But you can usually get AI to do an entire chapter all at once. And here it goes. Think about your last morning. Did you brush your teeth? Scroll through your phone before getting out of bed. Pour a cup of coffee without even thinking about it. Chances are you did. And chances are you didn't stop to question whether those behaviors were deliberate choices or simply autopilot routines. And a lot of these gurus will show you this exact process that I just showed you. And they'll say, see, look how fast you can write your book now. But I'm sure you guys can see the problem here. All this is doing is giving us regurgitated information that has just been collected from all of the different sources on the internet and other books, put all together, and then simply spit out again in a way that is different, but still kind of the same information. And this also begs the question, if anybody can get this information through ChatGPT or another chatbot like it, like I use Perplexity a lot to do research, if I can just get it through a chatbot, why do I need to buy a book that is the same stuff? Okay. So really the problem with this strategy of trying to fill all of these niches with just regurgitated informational content, the problem with that, it's not so much like doing it that I am worried about. I'm not worried about the legitimate authors who are doing things right. They're probably going to be fine. I'm worried about the people actually trying to make this strategy work, because it might have been something that worked in the past, but it is definitely not going to work now, simply because I can just go to ChatGPT and get this information myself, and more people are going to figure that out. And even if I don't do that, if I still go and read books, most of those books are going to be made in this fashion because so many people are just flooding Amazon with this type of book. So what do we do about this, right? That is the real question here. And I will start by actually talking a little bit about one of my books, which is the plot module. This is a book I wrote for authors. And the idea behind this book is that it gives you a chapter by chapter outline template Basically what I did is I went out and I researched every single template that I could find out there, because what I really wanted was something that would tell me on a chapter by chapter or scene by scene basis what should happen in every chapter. I saw that a lot of people out there would say, yeah, you got to have these 8 beats or these 12 beats or these 15 beats in your story, but they would never really show me where those should go, or like, should they be on multiple chapters long or just one moment in time. And I just really thought, like, for myself, working with ghostwriters too, or if you're a brand new author starting out, it would be really nice to just say this is the order of events, right? Some flexibility required, of course, but that was the whole idea behind the plot module. And so I created this, and this is my best-selling nonfiction. In fact, it's my best-selling book, period. It outsells both of my other nonfiction books combined, and is by far my top-selling book. And there are a couple of things that made this book different, that have made it a very successful book for me. Even though the nonfiction market is very flooded, this still does very well for me. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what some of those are, although I will do another video next that goes a little bit more in depth on my process of writing nonfiction. But let's just start by going through all of the different ways that you can actually find success with nonfiction without doing this information regurgitation that I just demonstrated using AI. So what do you need to write nonfiction? First of all, you need some kind of a personal brand, I believe. In this day and age, you need to be able to set yourself apart. It's okay to have pen names, but even those pen names should be specializing in something. And you should really go deep down the rabbit hole on what those topics are. In fact, I would say the most important thing for you to have is an obsession with the topic itself. You need to know more than the average AI, at least the average regurgitated information that AI gives you. You need to be more of an expert than that. You need to be obsessed with the topic. And then once you have that, you need to develop a kind of personal brand, something that differentiates you from the AI, where you are creating something, maybe different frameworks, different strategies, different systems that maybe didn't exist before, but are your way of going about that particular topic. And another thing that you're going to need are personal stories. Stories are absolutely essential. Even in nonfiction, you need to have some kind of story to back yourself up. These can be stories from yourself, from mentors you've had that you're just passing on the information you learned from them. It can be stories from clients. Doesn't matter, but you need some kind of story in there. So many times, even before AI came around, I would read a book and it was nothing but information. But when you have information, nobody really cares about that information until they have seen it in action inside of a story. So you need to have a personal story or a story of a client or something like that to go with it. Going along with that, you also need proof. You need to have proof that your frameworks work in some capacity, right? You need to show that you have experience with this topic. And that's very important. And you can get some of that through your stories, thankfully. And then I always think, I kind of touched on this already, but I think that you need to have some kind of your own framework or your own contribution, something that you are uniquely contributing to the topic that isn't just a regurgitation of other information. Because even if you're not using AI, too often authors will just regurgitate information that they just learned when going through this process. And I think in order to do this well, you need to, consume a lot of information on that topic, spend some time working with it, teaching it. But then at some point you need to come up with your own contribution, your own uniqueness that makes it unique. What can you put in there that is not already something AI knows? Or is a framework that AI doesn't know yet, right? That sort of thing. And then if you've done all that, then yes, it is fine to use AI to help you in the execution of your ideas. When I wrote the plot module, I developed all the frameworks and the ideas and the outline and everything myself. There are stories in here that are mine and personal to me. But there were elements where after I had assembled all that information, I could just go to the AI and say, okay, I need this section of the chapter to cover these 5 points, write it for me. And I knew I could do that. And then there are other elements where I knew I had to write that part because it was something that was more personal to me. And I just felt like I needed to be the one to express it in my own voice. And it's a hodgepodge of this. But the point is that AI can help you in the execution, but not in the actual development of the information, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people see AI as something that can do the thinking for you. And if you think so, not only will you be not getting very far in life, but you'll likely grow dumber as you don't use those thinking muscles. AI can help with the doing of a thing, but the human must always be in charge of the thinking. And I do think that using books alone as a strategy for nonfiction success is kind of outdated, honestly. I am admittedly a bit biased around this topic, but I think for nonfiction authors, especially in any educational space out there, YouTube is probably the best place to start, not with a book. And then once you've built up an audience on that YouTube, which is actually a lot easier to do if you have a niche enough educational topic, once you've built that audience, then you can release your books. And this is actually great because by that time, you will have heard enough feedback from your audience through your YouTube channel that you'll be able to take that information and add a lot of that unique flavor that will set your book apart and incorporate it into your frameworks and all of that. So that's just a little bit of advice there. I actually don't think that nonfiction authors should start with the book. They should start with a YouTube channel, somewhere where they can test ideas to see how well they deal with their ideal audience. And then once they've gotten some validation on those ideas, so something in the analytics of the YouTube channel or what have you to say, yeah, this is a good idea, then they can take those things and turn them into a book, which is what I did with this, but only after they've done a little bit of that validation and gotten that feedback. Now, don't get me wrong, nonfiction is far from dead. In fact, all this crap that is flooding Amazon does very little to affect those authors who are doing things the right way, because most of them never see the light of day thanks to Amazon's algorithm, which is just getting better and better at judging quality. And my plot module book makes more money than any of my other books, fiction or nonfiction, and more than my other 2 nonfiction books combined. So it's definitely doable, especially if you have some other kind of way of presenting your information, like in a YouTube channel like this one. If you combine all of the different mediums like that, you're almost certainly going to have a huge advantage over the people that are just putting out regurgitated information. And in my next video, I'll go through my entire process on how I write nonfiction books. So subscribe if you don't want to miss that video. And I'll see you there. And also, I teach authors how to use AI appropriately without sacrificing your creativity or ethics. So if you want to know more about that, the links are down below. And I'll see you there.